Good morning Burbs, my name is Azalira, and with PSO2 New Genesis launching today, I'd like to make an overview video for anyone who's been out of the loop or have never even seen or played PSO2 before, to give you a better understanding of the game and also what you're going into if you're going to be trying this free game. And also explaining to you why, in my humble opinion, that this game is the most free-to-play action online RPG game in the market right now that you can play with your friends all over the world without having to worry about ping. Without further ado, let's get into it. Phantasy Star Online 2 New Genesis is a free expansion to the already free-to-play Japanese online RPG Phantasy Star Online 2. While it is labeled as an expansion of the game, it should be treated as pretty much its own standalone game, only sharing its predecessor's title. The game itself is more or less a reboot of sorts that takes existing PSO2 systems and core fundamentals such as fashion and the fluid combat system and mixing it with a new graphically rich, ever-changing open world that you can just seamlessly explore. Any older or existing players of PSO2 will be able to transfer all of their characters and any acquired cosmetic and even more backend details such as like AC, SG, friends list, team list, alliances, everything that you can think of is basically compatible with NGS. Since, well, more or not, it is the same game, just with an entire like graphics and gameplay and everything overhaul. Including an economy and also level reset, so any new players should not be discouraged to play New Genesis, because as of day one here, everyone is going to be on the same footing, whether you're new, old, or returning. It's a completely fresh start, so let's all enjoy New Genesis together. So to give you a better idea of the contents available in the game, I'll be splitting this video into a few sections that you can look into. Number 1 is explaining the game's free-to-play model. Number 2, explaining all the combat systems. Number 3 is the world, exploration, and so on. And lastly, of course, the true endgame, aesthetics and fashion. In PSO2 New Genesis, all of the combat elements and also gameplay elements such as your skill trees, weapon skills, class skills, access to all the weapons, and even swapping classes is completely free in-game. You absolutely do not have to pay any form of microtransaction or do any form of gacha to get any weapons or any skills that would directly relate to your gameplay. In other words, what this means is anyone who spends exactly $0 on the game would have exactly the same gameplay no matter what as a person who would spend like, I don't know, $2,000 something on the game. Because just about everything that you can buy in PSO2 is really just aesthetics and some conveniences here and there, for example extra storage space or some things of the sort, which is totally unnecessary by the way if you know how to manage your storages and everything just right. And to side note unrelated to the combat, all the fashion that you can buy with real life money is basically tradable on the player market, so yeah, that's really what makes part of the free to play really free to play. So then comes the next question about lag. And I think it's a very natural thing to have this question in a lot of like MMO games or even just like lots of video games in general in this day and age especially. But the thing is, PSO2 is not a game with PvP, so ping actually doesn't matter because all the elements are PvE. What this means is, the system is actually client-sided for the most part. In other words, whatever you do will always register. And there's no such thing as like, oh, I didn't get hit there but died anyways because of lag. Because you can kind of think of the game as more or less a single player game where you can see other people and other people are also doing damage and stuff. It's kind of like everyone does their own thing and then the damage numbers register on the server. So realistically, ping doesn't really matter that much. And because of this, you can play the game from basically around the world with ease. I've been playing on the Japanese servers for basically 9 years. And I had no issues playing in Japan, playing in like other countries that I traveled to, playing in like America and stuff. I had no issue at all. So yeah, if you're really thinking about like ping as like an issue or something like that, please don't worry about it at all. So with that out of the way, let's talk about how the gameplay and combat is. PSO2 New Genesis features the ability for players to build their own combos with photon arts, which are effectively weapon skills, that can be utilized in any order and not fitting into exactly just one combo string. For example, if you have 3 skills here, you can use for example skill 1, 3, and 2, or skills 1, 2, and 3 in the order. You'll also be able to do certain things such as like animation cancelling and so on. So there's definitely a lot of freedom there that you'll be able to explore and really just experiment to find what suits your gameplay the most, or what suits your situation the most in relative to what your enemies are doing. With that being said, every weapon is unique in their own way, featuring multiple weapon skills and also this unique quirk called the weapon actions. The weapon action is a unique weapon mechanic that incorporates the core elements of the classes into the weapons itself. For example, the weapon action for the Hunter's Greatsword is a block. By holding down the weapon action, you can block an enemy's attack, and if you block an enemy's attack at a perfect time, you will instead parry the enemy's attack and unleash a very powerful counterattack onto the enemy. Or for example, the Ranger's Rifle's weapon action is a strafe, which allows you to fire a few bullets here and there, restoring your resource points, as well as also giving you a nice repositioning tool, or a reactive tool to dodge enemy attacks. In addition to this, every single weapon also has access to their own unique Photon Blast. The Photon Blast is a skill gauge that you have to build up by just basically doing damage to the enemies, and once it's full, you can unleash an extremely powerful attack. These attacks are absolutely devastating, so make sure to find the right time to use it. And speaking of utilizing weapons, PSO2 New Genesis features the all-new multi-weapon system where you can seamlessly transition between two different weapon types without having to do weapon swaps. If the weapon is a part of your main or subclass roster, you can use all of the actions the weapons can perform. This includes all the normal attacks, weapon actions, even photon arts and photon blasts. And this allows for some extremely cool combinations as well. For example here, imagine playing a rifle and seeing an incoming enemy attack. You can seamlessly use the rod's weapon actions, which is a guard, which will not only guard and mitigate the enemy's attack damage, it also restores your resource points, also called PP, in one fell swoop, with absolutely no interruption in the gameplay at all. So don't be scared to go out there and really experiment on what weapon combinations you would really like. Freedom of play is one of the most important features of New Genesis after all. And to further up your gameplay experience and depth, each class will have access to their own skill tree and also their subclasses' skill trees. But one important thing to note is some of the skills on the skill trees are only available on the main class only, which means that if you take those certain skills on the subclass, it will not work on your main class. With that being said though, a good chunk of the trees are generally curated towards specific weapon skills to increase their functionalities. For example, the ability to make some weapons perform up to 5 normal attack chains instead of 3. Or to increase some functionality of a weapon's counterattacks, or just straight up add new functionalities, or maybe just some quality of life. And on the note of gear, optimization in PSO2 New Genesis is also really easy. To level up your weapons, all you have to do is feed that weapon duplicates or just fodder that you get from killing enemies out in the field. Augmenting and affixing weapons with special abilities has also been the easiest it's ever been in the Phantasy Star series. As you kill the enemies in the field, they will also drop certain capsules, which will automatically get picked up to your inventory or sent to your material storage. How these capsules work is basically the more you add, the better the chances of success on the certain augment that you're going for. And for subsequent attempts, any already existing affixes on your gear that is not overridden can be transferred at a guaranteed rate. But now comes the question, what exactly are you powering up all your gear for if the content is already too easy? In PSO2 New Genesis, there is a new stat called the Battle Power stat, which is effectively a gear score system that judges the quote-unquote quality of your gear and the level of your classes. By allocating your skill points on your skill tree, unlocking your weapon's potential, grinding up your gear's level, affixing and augmenting your gear, and doing all these various things that power up your character, all of this will contribute to raising your gear score, which may be necessary to participate in certain quests or events. Leveling in New Genesis is one thing, but the game is going to shift towards a more gear-centric progression, which means that it is actually more important to get the proper pieces of gear in rather than leveling up your character. In a way, it is some kind of a gear check to make sure that people are not intentionally leeching in the 32-man raid bosses or something like that. So it's kind of a bit of a baseline to make sure that everyone can contribute, or just simply making sure that players don't go into zones that are way above their combat power and, you know, just like die. So be sure to gear up accordingly for all the content that you're going to be doing. And on a final note here about classes and gameplay, as of the launch of the game, 6 classes are available in the Hunter, Fighter, Ranger, Gunner, Force, and Tector. New classes and weapons are going to be making their way into the game soon as well, with Braver launching in August, who wields the katana and the bullet bow. The class Bouncer will also release in the fall of 2021, utilizing the dual blades and jet boots. Then in spring of 2022, the Summoner class will make its return, and we will also be getting a Gunblade class, which is currently unnamed, later in the year of 2022. You are a Meteorn, a being that has arrived on the planet of Halpha with no knowledge of the past. With the PSO2 New Genesis story being set 1000 years after the base PSO2 game, the universe has changed. many things are still unknown to you and to all of us. With our two heroines, Aina and Manon, finding you as you land on the planet, we joined the Arcs to aid in their battles against the extraterrestrial invaders called the Dolls. Although not much is known right now about the game's story, we'll have to play the main game story mode to find out. But on that note, for anyone who only plays the game for the gameplay and all, the story is actually not tied to any progression in the main game at all, so it can be enjoyed at any time at your own leisure. After all, the world of Halpha is vast and contains many open fields that let you freely explore, discover, and fight in many wild environments. As of the launch of the game, we are able to explore the entirety of the first region here, a land of lush green and occasionally pink flora known as the Aleo region. And just by being at a higher altitude, with a glance you can easily see all the other areas that will be available later on in the game. From Aleo itself, what we can see is a desert, a tundra, and a volcano region respectively, with a large airborne structure which, kinda looks like Einkrad, I guess? So watch out that if you die in game, you would die in real- oh wait, sorry, wrong series. But yeah, in the winter of 2021, one of these other regions will open up. Any guesses? Anywho, now to explain exactly how these various zones and fields work. So the world is broken up into various different zones that players can easily seamlessly transition towards with ease. There are only two categories of zones right now, which is the 8-player combat zone and 32 players gathering zone. So the combat zones are exactly as they sound. They're where you fight many enemies and a small amount of players for lots of EXP and drops. This is generally where you want to be farming for your levels and also for drops. In these combat areas, enemies tend to spawn either through emergency trials or by specific spots located on the map with an E, or a T in some cases. So whenever you see these markers on the map, make sure to go to it, because completing these trials by killing all the enemies will contribute to something called the PSC burst. The PSC burst meter is something that you can see in your top left of the screen, and to build these bars you basically just have to clear these trials and just kill enemies. Upon filling the bar, a PSC burst happens, which will spawn enemies in a certain area indefinitely until the time runs out. Once it runs out and you clear all the enemies, a climax happens which guarantees spawns a rare boss. And the rare bosses here is exactly what will drop you the high rarity gears. Now, the gathering zones are large 32-player instances that spans a large stretches of the world. All the materials you get from the areas are going to be useful in many ways, whether it be the materials and stones to upgrade your weapons potentials, to create a multi-weapon, to upgrade various stuff here and there, or even to cook for food buffs. And speaking of cooking, these passive animals, yeah, you can also kill them for meat and stuff, so... Especially these otters, by the way, because the otters actually drop, you know, one of the strongest meats for offensive power. So, yeah. And also, a lot of these materials that you gather from these zones can also be fed to what is called the Region Mag. Once full in energy, the Region Mag will not only give buffs to you, but also for the entire server. So do keep an eye out and make sure to visit the Region Mag often. Also because it's hella cute. Look at it! On another note, gathering zones are not free for combat actually. In fact, they contain a rather considerable amount of action that goes on in the fields as well. The kinds that you would actually not find in the combat areas. Outside of the emergency trials that you see in the gathering areas, they can also be a place where large-scale battles can also happen against powerful enemies. Each exploration region will have their own mossy armored bosses called the Dread enemies. These Dread enemies are powerful versions of specific bosses that you may have seen before in the game, and it is highly recommended that you challenge them with large groups of people as they are very powerful. And on June 23rd, which is around 2 weeks after release, an even more powerful variant of enemies can spawn, but only once certain special conditions are met. These enemies are called the Gigantics. They are so powerful that large groups of skilled players are needed if you want a chance of killing one, and all the players will have to be geared and also max level as well, otherwise you are going to face the level penalty against these enemies. But whether or not your drops are going to be worthwhile, we'll have to wait and see. Other than all the fun and crazy combat stuff, the Gathering Zone also houses the various instance-based dungeons of the game, which are called the Cocoons and the Towers. Although most of these dungeons really act as a tutorial for different mechanics of the game, so most likely you're going to be encountering all these cocoons and clearing them all at a very early level. I would think they're pretty hard to miss, so don't worry about it. Since PSO2 New Genesis is a large open world game, every single zone in the game contains what is called a Ryuker device, which is a monolith structure used to teleport. Well, I mean, that's a fancy way of saying it's a teleport waypoint, basically. so you can teleport to any of these devices at any time. Lastly is the urgent quest system. You go out to the specific location highlighted on the map, as that will be your venue of fighting the unique boss you will not see anywhere else. Players can take on exclusive enemies or unique events with others for the thrill of it, and also for another source of gear. Although to note, it is also stated that every single urgent quest that are not tied to events are random. Since this is the case, if the rewards from these quests are another source of the current gear you can farm from the battle areas or purchasable, then players will not have to worry too much about participating on all these quests all the time, as sometimes the schedules can be really harsh to get to, whether it be due to work or school. So it's always nice to know the fact that it's not going to be very important to have to farm these urgent quests that comes up at random times, but rather just participate in them when you can. The true endgame for Phantasy Star Online 2. Everyone knows that PSO2 is just a character creator meant for you to do screenshots with some combat elements. No, I'm just kidding. No, but real talk though, generally after you played just about all the content of an MMO game and stuff, you would always, or well, many people would always just resort to, doing fashion and screenshots and stuff, and PSO2 is no slouch in that at all. In fact, it's one of the main features of the game. There's always a new fashion catalog once every 2 or 3 weeks, meaning there's always new costumes for you to try out very so often. And the best part about this, you don't have to pay a single cent if you don't want to, because all the items available in the game are also marketable on the player's market. So if you do save up enough money in game, you can buy that emote you always wanted to have. And also, you get a free roll per day on this thing called the SG Scratch, which allows you to get a lot more fashion, emotes, and whatnot as well. You're eventually going to get exactly what you want, right? Because even after a certain amount of pulls, you also get to pick and choose exactly which item you want, which is absolutely awesome for all free-to-play players. So let's talk about all the features that the fashion has to offer in New Genesis. For those who have not gotten to try out the new fashion stuff in New Genesis with the benchmark tool that we had earlier, there's many features that are present here, and I'd like to highlight a few of them. Most costumes comes with the ability to toggle certain parts such as say neckties, socks, or other provided components on or off. You're also going to be able to customize all 9 of your different characters' expressions accordingly to how you like them as well. Many of the accessories in the game, for example my signature bunny ear ribbon, can also have the ability to be recolored to match the color of your outfits and different parts of your body or whatnot better depending on what accessory it is. Accessories also go by a cost system, in which each accessory can range between 1 to 4 cost, to a maximum of 18, so you can really customize almost to your heart's desire. Almost because, well, there's still a limit of 18 for the points, right? So just in case you wanted to do anything beyond that. But mostly for me, I personally find 18 very sufficient, but maybe that's just me because I prefer minimalistic looks. Another awesome feature that was added to the game is actually you have animations for idle, running, sprinting, gliding, jumping, everything you can just about think of, and they can all be changed independently as well. These animations are called motions, and as more of these motions are released, you can actually just, be super ridiculous eventually and just have, for example, say an idle animation where your hands rest on your hips, or a glide akin to a parachute dive, or even something as ridiculous as a Naruto run. Which means that, yeah, you can probably go in the field and 32-man Naruto run somewhere. And so yeah, because of this, some of the gathering zones will also be tailored towards screenshots as well. For example, the Halphilia Lake area is going to be a zone in which enemies actually do not spawn under quote-unquote normal times, so it's going to be a perfect area for screenshots. Couple this with all the already existing zones, extra lighting effects, all the day-night cycle, the everything. I'm 100% sure that New Genesis is going to please all you up-and-coming photogenic fashionistas, and I hope to see you all soon in the screenshots community. And with all that, I really hope that this video helps explain a lot to all you new players about what exactly New Genesis is and what exactly you're going to be coming into. With all the systems as it is in place, I've played PSO2, the base one, for at least 8 to 9 years by now, and I barely even spent any money. And all the money I spent is actually just because I want to support Sega, I want to support the game, not because out of necessity at all. I've got all my fashion kingdom, I've got all my everything now, and it's going to be the same for New Genesis as well. All the gameplay is completely free, I've never felt a need to really just have to spend money at all, so in my opinion, it is really, honestly, the most free-to-play RPG game I've ever played And I would highly recommend this game for anyone as well, because New Genesis honestly has the potential to be one of the biggest, craziest games if done right. So I'm really excited to see what the futures unfold, and hope all of you are going to be here with me for it too. So with that, take care of yourself and don't forget to smile! I'll see you in my future live streams or videos here on YouTube.